Okay, we're ready to start, and then we'll come back to that if that's okay. Good evening. This is the March 24th, 2021 meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. Welcome, everybody. We've got Maureen, Joel, and Wendy and Mike joining us via Zoom, and the rest of us here in chambers. So with that, we'll start the meeting. First item is approval of the March 10th minutes. Do you have any additions, corrections, deletions? Would somebody like to move to accept?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. And Rich seconded. So we have Victoria's motion, Rich's second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. And Jennifer, remind me to come and sign those before we leave today. So next item is the public comment period. I don't believe we have anybody in the audience today, but would encourage folks to take advantage of the opportunity to come down and speak with us about items that don't happen to be on the agenda for the day. All right, with that, we'll move to the third item, the preliminary development review of 201 West 6th Street, 6th and Jackson development. And Mike, I believe you're up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. Everybody see that all right?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Perfect, thank you.
Does that work better for you, Maureen? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Me also.
Okay. So this is the preliminary development review of the 6th and Jackson development by Rusty Olps. It's at 201 West 6th Street, and this is the URA's property at that southwest corner of 6th and Jackson. So taking a look at the proposed development, 23,929 square feet, three-story mixed-use building. Looking at the ground level, we've got 6 commercial tenant spaces, 1 commercial/cafe space on the ground floor as well, and then adjacent to the proposed parking lot on the west end, 8 enclosed parking bays. Second and third floors contain 8 two-bedroom apartments, and those are up-down units that encompass the second and the third floor. And then 2 studio apartments that are each individual studios on a single floor. And then 2 parking lots containing 15 off-street parking spaces in total are located on the site, as well as the extension of Hello Walk as provided in the design guidelines. So just to remind you of the property, here it is outlined in red, southwest corner of 6th and Jackson. We've got Jackson heading due south here, and then 6th Street heading east-west. This would be the Ale House, Jimmy John's, University Point development here to the west, and then the Jackson Silos to the south. We have a bank across Jackson Street to the east. You can see that there's been some improvements to the property, street frontage improvements. And the URA has completed those as part of the development of this property. So we've got street frontage improvements on 6th Street, which include the brick pavers and historic light fixtures, as well as street trees. Those stop about this point, just primarily because of access is yet undetermined for a project to be solidified on the property, and so they're leaving that open. But that'll be completed in the future. And then you have more of a courtyard area here. It's intended to be the start of the Hello Walk extension through the property. So just to recap on Legacy Crossing, urban mixed commercial is the underlying zoning district for the property. So that regulates all the uses as well as the bulk and dimensional requirements, so setback requirements, height requirements, use requirements, things of that nature. And then we've got the Legacy Crossing Overlay District, which is another layer over this property in this area. It's really intended to create a review process for development within Legacy Crossing. It provides the mechanism for implementing the design guidelines that were adopted, I think first adopted around 2012. They've been updated. Last update was 2015. And the design guidelines are really intended to make sure that redevelopment is consistent with the community's original vision of this area. And so this is a page out of the design guidelines, kind of goes through the purpose and intent of being more unique characteristics to this area, and additional requirements are required in order to preserve kind of the community's vision. It also goes into items within this development are intended to be guidelines, so it gives some flexibility to allow minor deviations and variations that the commission may make when they're reviewing the project. And so they're really just intended to be guidelines, and the commission may deviate a little bit beyond those. So just to recap the review process, there's a pre-application meeting between the city and the developer. And then the preliminary LCO development review is where we're at today. There's a 15-day public comment period, so we noticed this in the paper, and the public's allowed to submit comments to our office, and then the comments are received and forwarded to the commission's consideration. So we notified the public from February 27th through March 15th of this year, and we received no public comments on this proposal. And then, of course, that brings us here tonight, being reviewed by the commission as a regular agenda item, not a public hearing. So the evaluation of the conformance to the proposal with the design guidelines is really the intent tonight. And then the commission has a few different actions. They can approve the development as proposed, or approve it subject to modifications or conditions, or deny the development proposal. And then there will be a final development review, so even if there's no changes made, we'll still have to come back through and just solidify the plans. If there are changes that need to happen, usually that gives an opportunity for the commission to come back and make sure those changes are to their liking. So that brings us to the proposal. This would be the conceptual image here, looking at the 6th and Jackson intersection. This is looking to the southwest. You can see the silos in the background. I would note that it's really undetermined as far as whether or not what's going to be developed on this property. So they've just shown kind of a single-story multi-use building for the time being, but this isn't part of the review. It's the building on the north block of the property, just north of Hello Walk, that we're mainly reviewing. So more of an aerial, same location, just more of an aerial view. This would be the commercial cafe space proposed down here on the ground floor. You'd have various commercial tenant spaces along 6th Street. These would be the 2 studio apartments here. And then you'd have more townhouse-style apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floors extending over to the parking lot area. If you're looking south on 6th Street, the view looking to the northeast. So this would be at the end of Hello Walk. You can see the Hello Walk extension here. So that's intended to be lined with street trees, as well as the historic style light fixtures, brick pavers, and some concrete pavement as well. So similar design to the street frontage improvements that have already happened, as well as the street frontage improvements that already exist along College Street as well. So you can see there's a pull-through parking lot. We have a number of parking spaces here, I believe 15 spaces. We've got about 8 garage spaces here that are individual garages, and then 3 parallel spaces in this parking lot here to the west. Another view looking to the north. There is a single-story kind of commercial tenant space here. This is intended to be the more of a refuse room. And they do have a green roof shown on this single-story building. You can see there's entrances to the individual apartment units from the rear that go in. There's a small porch on each one of those units there. That would be a view looking down Hello Walk to the southwest. So that would be the commercial cafe space there. And then a view from Hello Walk looking to the west. You can see the entrances to some of those apartments there on the second floor. About the same location looking to the northeast towards 6th and Jackson intersection. And then a view looking at the entrance to the parking area on the west side. So the individual garages and the parking lot, as well as the storefronts, the commercial spaces here. This is the site plan that was submitted. So you can see the extension of Hello Walk through the property. This would be the entrance to the southern parking lot. You'd have all these angled parking spaces, an ADA space or two, and then you'd have the parking lot off of 6th Street to the west, 3 off-street parking spaces, and then all the 8 garage spaces there. And then you can see we've got a landscaping adjacent to the parking lot. This would be the first floor, so the ground floor plan for the project. And so you can see, I think there's a little bit of flexibility built into these commercial spaces here. A tenant may be able to choose 1 or 2 or multiple spaces to make our elevation here. So this is looking north from Hello Walk. This would be the south elevation as well, just kind of looking beyond the commercial building and looking into the access to the apartments. So a little bit closer look there on the south. You can see the building materials, so the finished materials designated there. So there's metal paneling, wood panels, painted flat metal panel, flat vertical metal panels, sealed concrete, and brick. Same elevation, just the left side of the screen. And then that brings us to the elevation on the north. That would be looking at south on 6th Street. So we have the same facade building materials, combination of mainly brick, metal, concrete. You can see the glazing there on the first floor. So a large percentage of window openings for the storefronts, separated by these kind of brick columns. And then varying building materials as you go up different stories to kind of break up the massing. So this brings us to the east elevation. So this is looking mainly from Jackson Street, kind of Jackson Street Hello Walk area. So this would be the cafe commercial space here and the 2 studios above. Looking beyond the commercial space, the single floor commercial space there further on down Hello Walk. And then the west elevation, which shows the parking garages on this side. So these are a couple exhibits out of the design guidelines. You can see that the vision here is to extend Hello Walk to end up tying into the Hello Walk on campus by the admin building. It essentially transects the property. This was the detail that is provided in the design guidelines. You can see there is concrete pavers here. We've got brick pavers, shade trees, as well as historic light fixtures about every 60 feet. As you can see, they've accounted for the design of Hello Walk through the project. We are still working out a couple minor details. There is a little bit of a conflict between this tree and some of the projections on the 2nd and 3rd floors. So we're working a little bit transitioning that or maybe eliminating that tree. And we need to fill in some trees and lights down in this area. And so that's likely going to change a little bit from this review to the final review. So going through kind of analysis that's I also included in the staff report of just all the design guidelines. Looking at building placement, so it's required to be 5 feet within the property lines of Jackson and 6th Street, so pushed up against the street front, and it meets that requirement. Meets 20% of the total building frontage length, maybe set back a maximum of 15 feet. Really don't have to dip into that at all. It's pretty much pushed up to the property line in all areas of this project. Building height, so required to be a minimum height of 20 feet or 2 stories. Majority of the project is 3 stories in height. And then it doesn't exceed the maximum building height, which is 60 feet or 60 feet or 5 stories, excuse me. Then taking a look at the general building facade design. Front facade shall include a main entrance and number of transparent window openings. It does. There's the main entrance that's located kind of by that 6th and Jackson intersection, as well as right on Hello Walk. Large transparent windows. There's really no blank walls on any of the facades. They have the same facade that continues on all the buildings. You'd have clear visual distinction between each floor should be provided, so they have a lot of building treatments. Building materials change between floors. There's a lot of varying windows. Some of those facade articulations that provide that clear distinction between the floors. The facade should include both solid surfaces and window openings to avoid the creation of blank walls, inner glass curtain walls. And then the facade, in staff's opinion, is really evenly balanced between the different size windows and the solid surfaces. And then the rear and side facades are equivalent to really the front facades. So it meets all the requirements in our opinion there. Looking at the openings for windows, states that 50 to 85% of the ground floor facades that front public street and pedestrian ways need to be occupied by windows and or entry doors. So we had calculated 59%. So it meets that requirement by quite a bit. And then windows and doors utilize transparent glass. In our opinion, for everything that we can see, that transparent glass is being proposed there. Mirror tinted glass is discouraged. And then taking a look at the windows on the 2nd and 3rd floors, need to have at least 20% of the wall areas have those openings. And so we calculated that at 25%. So it meets that requirement as well. Brings us to projecting facade elements. Should be keeping in the historic architecture within the community, including awnings and marquees. So we do have a combination of that brick, masonry, solid concrete. We've got some metal awnings over the commercial frontage, and in our opinion that would be consistent with kind of the architecture in the downtown area. We state that where buildings are adjacent to the public street or pedestrian ways, 75% of the facade should contain projecting facade elements to provide shade and shelter pedestrians. This is a little deficient. We calculated that at about 65%, but in our opinion, I think it still meets the intent of the guidelines. There's several articulations there within the 2nd and 3rd floors that provide some sheltering elements, and just the overall design of the building. I think it would detract from the building if you were to add awnings in some of those places. And so, in our opinion, I think that 65% is close enough, and just the overall design meets really the intent of the design guidelines there. But certainly able to discuss that a little bit further. And then for facade articulations, so street-facing building facades as well as facades that front, for instance, Hello Walk, should be articulated to improve the quality of the design. So certainly with this project and the design, you'd say that meets that really well. And then building materials, making sure there's appropriate building materials. Obviously there are being proposed with the brick, masonry, sealed concrete, vertical metal, wood panels, custom metal panels. Those are all appropriate. There's no inappropriate building materials being proposed. And then the painted surfaces, as far as we can tell, have a low gloss finish to them. So, definitely meets that requirement. Off-street parking. There are only 9 off-street parking spaces required because urban mixed commercial, we only require parking as far as this development for the residential use. And it's 50% of what's required by our code. So looking at the number of apartments and how many bedrooms each of them have, only 9 are required, but they've provided 23 as part of this project. So well exceed the minimum required there. And then placement of off-street parking, the design guidelines points us to say that really needs to be to the side or the rear. Can't be in front of buildings, and the location of all the off-street parking meets all the design guidelines here. We also have kind of a minimization of some of the surface parking with the inclusion of those 8 individual garage units for the residential units. Looking at parking lot landscaping, it meets that requirement as well. So 5 canopy trees are required, 8 are provided. Also has the landscape buffer, so we have enough room between the parking lot and the adjacent right-of-way. And then we've got the standard 3-foot buffer, which is shrubs every 6 feet and then trees every 40 feet on center. And so it meets the parking lot requirements. Key public spaces. So we already have the large kind of plaza build at the beginning of Hello Walk at the 6th and Jackson intersection that meets that requirement. And then they have identified some public art installation near the circle, the larger plaza at the Hello Walk, but not a whole lot of details on that, but they do have a tentative location to incorporate some type of public art as part of this project. And then stormwater management, still providing some additional details on this, but one of the proposals is to have a green roof on the smaller commercial building, as well as multiple planters that are dispersed throughout the development that also provide some of the stormwater filtration as well. But they are working on more of a detailed stormwater plan that would utilize some of the best practices in stormwater filtration. Brings us to bike parking. Legacy Crossing does require bicycle parking. There are 14 parking spaces that are required as part of this proposal, and 8 are shown on the site plan, so that's one of the items that we do need to increase with the final review. And we've discussed that with the developer as well, and there should be no problem fitting a few more bicycle parking spaces somewhere on the property. So I'm sure that that'll be completed in the final review. And the ones that are shown do meet all the required dimensions for bicycle parking within our code. So it brings us to the recommendation. After staff's review with the design guidelines, project is within substantial compliance with the guidelines, and staff recommends approval of the proposed development, assuming those minor modifications will be made from this stage to the final stage. So. And the developers here, Rusty Opes, and I would certainly be able to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So, questions for Mike or for Rusty? Gosh. I do have a couple of, as we proceed here, in the areas where there's been partial conformance, and then this one on the stormwater where it says no information provided. I guess I'd like a little better sense of what's going to happen there, and if we do approve this, if it should be conditioned on meeting that particular requirement.
We certainly could. Yeah, I think we have an opportunity at the final review to make a note that if that's not there, we put a condition on it at that point. But certainly if if the commission felt that we needed a condition on the stormwater. I have been in conversations with the architect on the project and the civil engineer, and they're currently working on that. Okay. And I know that any project within the city is required to detain stormwater if it's over 5,000 square feet of new impervious surface, which this project would. Our design guidelines points to best practices in stormwater management, so we go a little bit above and beyond what the typical city code requires. And the architect is from Portland area and is used to dealing with, kind of more environmentally friendly stormwater approaches. And so I wouldn't doubt that they'll come up with something rather innovative for the stormwater on the site. But we certainly could make a condition that, the bike parking and the stormwater be provided in a satisfactory fashion.
Okay. Nels?
Yeah, Michael, or Rusty, either one, that portion of the building doesn't have to be one story, does it? Couldn't it be two?
Are you referring to the smaller commercial building adjacent to Hello Walk?
Yeah, the building that
Has the green roof?
Rob's talking about, couldn't it be, I guess my question is, why is it one story right now?
Rusty could certainly answer that, but yeah, I mean, my answer would be that it doesn't have to be one story, it could be two.
The primary consideration is just light. That's the south side of the building. And so the higher we go on Hello Walk, the more shady and the courtyard and those residences will be. So my instinct is to create higher density, but I think in this case, my desire to see light infiltrate that whole southern side of the building won the argument.
Well, I don't, that question wasn't meant as a criticism. We've been, are we supposed to make a is it time to make a comment? Wendy, do you want to make you want to start?
I just wanted to ask the question when I was reviewing the plans. I couldn't exactly see where the bicycle parking is supposed to go. I also noticed the deficit in that arena, and I'm glad that's being addressed. But could you show us where the bicycle parking right now is proposed to go? I couldn't find it on the in the packet. It seems like a location that would get high bicycle use, which is why I'm asking the question. So.
I think it's on the back of page 1.
They have it shown just south of the parking garages. So I don't know if you can see my cursor or not there, but it's right in that area.
Oh, I thought that was a staircase. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, so obviously another 6 spaces will appear somewhere in that.
Yeah, it could be in this courtyard area. They certainly have quite a bit of room up here. It's more protected, and there's
More
quite a few
security.
spaces
Yeah.
there. And of course, I mean, every one of those individual garages certainly has a room for a bicycle in there and so probably envision if I myself was living here, I'd probably store the bicycle in my own garage. So we could certainly look at counting those for the bicycle parking spaces as well.
So the requirement for bicycles, just for a matter of information, is tied to both uses, the commercial and the residential?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
So that kind of leads me to, I would love to hear from Nels and Wendy with respect to any of the architectural issues, because
Well, I'll start out, if you don't mind, Wendy, this idea of Hello Walk has been developed now 13, 14 years ago, and the city has picked up on it. It's not clear that the university is paying attention, to be honest with you, but the Hello Walk thing makes this a very difficult project, and in my mind, It's a beautiful concept, but it makes this a kind of a flat iron building. And in my mind, I've been watching now for the last 6 or 8 years as people have tried to design something, and I presume Rusty has gone to the well and found one of the University of Idaho's, I won't use the word great, but he's certainly one of our finest products, runs a firm in Portland that is dramatically able and modern. And in my mind, this is without a doubt the finest piece of effort for this Flatiron site that I have seen. And I've seen 6 or 7. The Sangria people tried. They had a pretty good idea, to be honest with you. The Sangria folks but they ran into financial issues. Rusty will probably run into the same issues as well, but in my view, this is a dream piece of work. You can't find a better architect, you can't find a better design than this in my estimation. And I don't want to wax too eloquent, but I can't help myself.
Wendy, do you have any thoughts?
She's muted.
There we go.
Yeah, I was muted here. Well, I concur with Nels's statements. I mean, who is the architect? I realize it's CoLab, but who's?
It's
who's
Mark
that?
Enberg of Co-op, CoLab.
Okay, yeah, all right, great. And I think it's an energetic design and certainly engages the site. I guess my only question would be the number of materials that are being combined in one building, but it may work. It's something that I would maybe have a little bit of concern about. But I think the fact that there are more materials than other proposals that we've seen gives it more energy. It's not so static, and because of that site with the combination of the grain elevators and a largely brick downtown and brick university, has some different palettes coming from its surroundings, and I don't know how many you can combine in one building. That would be maybe my one question, but other than that, I think it complies with the design guidelines and interprets them very creatively. So I'm pleased with results so far. So
I did have one non-architectural question, and that is, given that the 2-bedroom apartments are all a walk-up, is there an ADA issue that has to be addressed?
I believe since they're townhouse style, they're not required to, or if they're
Okay.
below a certain number of units, they don't require to meet
Okay.
ADA.
Okay.
So,
Great. Joel, any comments from you?
Well, I was going to ask the same question you just did about ADA, but I'm satisfied with that. One question I did have, is there any maximum on the number of parking lots or parking spaces in the guidelines? Since
I think for surface parking, it's no more than essentially twice, I believe, the amount that's required. But that doesn't include parking within garages. It's just surface parking.
Okay.
So we're right at
I
that.
guess my understanding of the reason why it went to a half of the originally required ones was to sort of minimize the amount of the Legacy Crossing ground space that was occupied by parking, and I was wondering whether this is consistent with that.
Yeah, and so in our review it meets that just because of the 8-9 garage spaces that are provided that don't count towards that. I know that there's been quite a bit of concern over off-street parking from the Urban Renewal Agency, and so I'm sure that, they would not be advantageous to not provide any just because of the development cost associated with it. But I know that that's been a point of contention with the Urban Renewal Agency and public comments so far prior to this meeting was that they needed to find kind of enough off-street parking to serve the development, although we have the requirement that says that, it pretty much cuts the development requirement in half for the off-street parking. And so that's kind of the history up to this point.
Yeah, given the history we've had in recent years about parking issues, why maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, I would have to agree after Identity and a few other developments that have experienced some issues with insufficient parking for that leads to my question. Who is the intent? I know across the street we're looking at a development for retirees essentially. Who is the targeted audience or client for occupancy of this building? Are there ideas for that?
I think the intended, the target client is going to be, I don't know how to describe them. I mean, loosely, university professionals and other people in that demographic. So we've certainly seen an uptick in the number of people looking for smaller but higher end spaces who are used to an urban environment and prefer that. So I don't want to supply dozens of those in Moscow. I don't know how deep that market is, but I know it's 10 deep at least. So that's the audience. It would be a higher level, executive type person or professor or small family. And even in some cases, there's student rentals and Pullman in particular that are designed similar to this that fetch a high price. And so I wouldn't be opposed to some students as well. But the target would be people who want to live and work in that neighborhood.
Thank you. What about the commercial spaces? Are you thinking retail? Or are you thinking other tenant? Do you have tenants?
The goal is to keep it lively. How I get there is going to be a challenge, and I don't know what the marketplace will look like at the point at which I'm leasing this. I tore out all the office space that I originally had in the plan because that's become an utterly unpredictable market. And it's a boring market. There's no nightlife. There may be no services provided to the public. It just depends on what the offices are used for, obviously. But the target would be commercial, retail, active, making that corner a destination.
Victoria,
Thank you.
had a question?
So I attend and follow the Urban Renewal Agency meetings faithfully. And so I have seen, as Nils mentioned, many iterations of what might go there. It's a very difficult lot to work with these triangles and being split by Hello Walk. And this is pretty spectacular. And I've seen Rusty do adaptations all along the way and he's serving multiple masters. He's got to do what the URA's looking for, what the city's looking for, so on and so forth, and the market. And I appreciate that you're I want you to succeed, or whoever builds there succeeds. I don't want to see a failure there. But I'm very impressed,
Yeah.
and you've been very adaptable and come up with some really fine-looking things here.
Thank
And
you.
I think you'll complete it. The things that are lacking, you'll work it through, and URA will make sure you do. So anyway,
That's
and
great.
it's come a long way from Otto's Market,
Yeah. So Dennis and Rich, any Questions, comments? Mike, how about you?
No, it looks well thought out, well planned. It meets the major part of the criteria. It's very attractive. To me, it just looks wonderful.
Well, with that, and
Let me just speak to the parking. I realize that the parking issue will be with us, and in due time, we will build a couple of parking structures in Moscow, and the university will finally get off the dime and build a parking structure as well. Washington State, of course, has more money, and we can see what happens there. They've got 3 or 4 structures, and you can't get in them. They're always packed. So what we need to do to make Legacy Crossing work is to try to be encouraging, in my mind, to the potential of keeping the university and the town kind of growing together in that way. And we have this historic downtown that I think that we'd like to try to nurture, but the modern town of Moscow could be, right, starting at this corner, could become. And those of you, if you had wanted to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to urban renewal meetings, you would have heard a lot of discussion about the potential of when Kreitz leaves, and that whole space that Mike showed, nearly 20 acres. And all this sort of depends on the university being able to get on its feet and fly and gain a few new students. In other words, the growth of the university, we've run out of space on the typical campus, and so this 20 acres between this point and the university is a perfect place for a modern university to grow. And it would be, there's no doubt there'll be if we could get 2 or 3 really good projects started, we'll change our attitude about parking and start being more demanding. But if you decide to be demanding about parking on day one, it's just like identity. Okay, we took a little risk with identity. But it sets an image for the city, a new modern city, if you will. And I, for one, I know we went through a little duress with it. I think it's working. I've talked to the complaints, it's worked out. But I believe there's a future here, and I think that I don't think we'll see a better project than this. Now, in my mind, the issue is, can you find people to fill it and build it? So the market will ask the tougher questions, and we can ask here tonight. But I think it's, at least my 50 years being in architecture tells me, based on everything I know about Legacy Crossing and the guidelines that the city has set up, this is about as good as this is as good as we're gonna get. Not about this is as good. And so I think it's, I would encourage it, and I would certainly.
Sounds like we're ready to proceed. And Mike, do you need a formal approval from us, or just a go-ahead? How do we frame the approval of the preliminary review so that you can move forward?
I would need a motion, please.
Okay.
Who are we sending this to city council?
You're not. This is just a commission review, but it will
Right.
come back for the final review. So you'll just be approving the preliminary review of the project.
And I I won't make the motion, but I think that we ought to at least have some conditions on a couple of the areas that we had concerned about conformity, so that I'd like to see that work up front rather than waiting till the final review. So other than that, that's my only comment. I'm certainly ready to proceed as well. So do we have a motion to move forward and approve the review?
Are you suggesting that you'd like to see, as it develops, to see it come back for details about the second building, or?
I don't think we do that, do we, Mike? When you say the second building, you mean the?
The building you asked the question about.
Well, alls I'm saying is that there were a couple of areas where we looked at the conformity, and one was partial, that was the bikes. And then the other was where it was no information provided on the stormwater. I guess I want to make sure that those issues are addressed. And in my thinking, the time to address it is right now. Obviously, we're going to approve this, or we're going to recommend approval to go to the final review. I just would kind of like to see it conditioned on resolving those two issues that were presented.
So you kind of want the motion to go forward with the expectation that the stormwater
Yes.
situation would be completed to satisfaction, and that the bike parking slots would be completed as
Yep,
well.
exactly. Is that a motion?
You can make that a motion.
Okay, so.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I think that I heard from Dennis. He
Oh,
said
okay.
so moved, and Wendy, you're second. So Dennis's motion, Wendy's second. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Is that good enough for you to move
It is.
forward then, Mike?
Yep, it
Okay.
is.
Fantastic. Rusty,
Great
thank you very much.
project.
I think we're all enthused about what you've got in the works there, so. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a discussion, not intending it to be a lengthy discussion, but continuing education. And it was an issue that Wendy brought up even a couple of years ago, and I would like to try to get a sense from the commissioners what kind of continuing education would work for you. Publications that you would review, maybe a quarterly or semi-annual discussion session at a meeting. I think the issue for me is what format is going to be most productive for you in dealing with issues that we have to deal with. I don't want to overburden this, but I think we need to keep the issue moving forward. So I don't have a specific notion on this. That's why I kind of would like to hear from you about what kinds of things you think might work for you so that we can keep the issue alive.
I think for me, we just kind of wait and see what we need. I don't think we need to push anything out there right now. I don't see anything that I need to brush up on until, something comes to the forefront where it tells us that we might need some education on it.
Okay.
And that's my thought.
I was thinking of the idea, because we have a series of subdivisions apparently that we will be considering over the next several months. Maybe looking at some resources, either online speakers, or we actually have, I know a colleague who recently relocated to Moscow who was heavily involved with Idaho's smart growth and used to serve on the board. And I'm wondering if something along those lines would be good to sort of encourage more creative annexation and development of our city as it grows. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but finding some kind of presentation that either we access through Zoom or some other means.
Well, Wendy,
Yeah.
my view is a big thing has just happened in Moscow. I would have said, and I have said for the last 20 years, all the residential growth is going to be out toward Moscow Mountain, and all of a sudden, we're going to learn that that's not the case, and that the southwest quadrant is all of a sudden going to be before us,
Right.
with
Right.
Schweitzer moving in, and with various, that's going to encourage some things. And so I would hope that Michael could think of issues that would be related to that development that's going to happen, that we could get speakers or focus in that area to assist in how we should see that development going.
Well, and that
I think
kinda-
it's going to be really an exciting time.
That kind of speaks Dennis's point about as we have issues that we need to have more information on. So, I don't know, Wendy, you mentioned Victoria. What about any thoughts? I'm just trying to get ideas here, so.
I'm not looking for a ton of reading
Yeah.
because we've had a ton of reading, like 5G, and I don't want to do a lot more of that.
Okay. Well, I'll tell
It's
you-
going to be responsive a lot to what comes up.
Yeah.
And the whole south development won't be just residential, it's going to be commercial as well. So I don't know how that's all going to tie
Well,
in.
as we move forward here, I'll spend some time with Mike, and if we see issues come up that I think would be helpful for us, we'll see if we can get information out, and either, and I agree with you, I mean, I don't want to overburden everybody with a lot of reading stuff, but if there's a speaker, or if there's a particular issue that we could kind of target some information where we could become better educated, so, Mike, I'll work with you on that. Like I said, I didn't want to make a huge deal out of this, but I want to keep the issue alive, so.
Now, the one that I really liked was the mobility workshop we did. And I got a lot out of that.
Yeah, and it's likely that we typically have that Priest Lake conference that Eastern Washington puts on. There's usually some really good speakers there, and I wouldn't doubt that that's going to be Zoom, via Zoom this year. So we have that $1,500 budget that we haven't used any of, so
That would be
we
good,
could certainly
yeah.
register some
Okay.
commissioners for that. And I haven't heard any news on that yet, but that usually starts to come out here within the next month, because it is in May. So that would be coming up pretty quick. And like I said, it's always some really good kind of innovative speakers from all over. So
Okay.
I'll keep abreast of that, and as soon as I hear something, I'll forward it out, and maybe we could have a handful of people attend that. That'd be
Okay,
good.
that's great. Okay, that, any other issues out of the meeting?
No, that's it. And the next meeting will be, I believe, the 14th of April.
Super, okay, thanks, Joe. Announcements, Mike, anything from,
Only announcement I have is that at the next meeting, we don't really have a whole lot of agenda items, but at the following meeting, so it'll be the second meeting in April, we'll likely have 2 subdivision plats that we'll hear at that meeting, so it's probably going to be a rather lengthy meeting. And I was verging on maybe canceling our next meeting, which would be the first meeting in April, since don't have much for the agenda, and we'll likely have a longer meeting at the end of April. So-
okay, that certainly works for me. Anybody, is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
For me,
it's
I might
always
be
good
out
to.
of town.
Okay, one other thing, announcement from me. There was, and I think that Mike sent it out to all of you, the note from Gary Reedner. Actually, it was out to the city council, but reminding us about our role when we're contacted by the public, and firsthand. And I talked to our city attorney, Mia, today about this. I've already had 2 contacts regarding developments that are going to be coming before us. So I want us to be mindful of conflicts of interest and the fact that, certainly it's sometimes an awkward situation when people ask you about it, but if we're talking in terms of process and those kinds of issues rather than talking about the project itself or the merits of the project, I think it'll be okay. But it's just, if there's any doubt, call Mia, call Mike, call me, and we'll talk it through. But I think it's really important for all of us to make sure that we're totally transparent with these projects as they're coming out at us. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting and an appropriate reminder from Gary out in abroad. And I think that did you all see that email? It came out today, so just something to keep in mind. So, all right, with that, I guess any other issues for the good of the order? All right, well, with that, we will declare the meeting adjourned, and we'll see you then on April, what is that, the date on the second one?
Well, the 23rd, maybe?
Just take a quick look here.
It's actually going to be the 28th.
28th, okay. So we're gonna, the meeting originally scheduled for the 14th we're gonna notice that to be canceled, and we'll be here with bated breath on the 28th. Okay, with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you.